In a world ruled by masks, where truth is currency, and illusion, the crown, the most dangerous weapon, is not forged in steel, but whispered in silence. We are taught to be kind, but punished when we are naive. We are told to trust, yet betrayed by those who smile the most. And so, the wise do not scream. They strategize. This is not a tale of evil, but of survival. Not of monsters, but of men who learn to hide their claws beneath silk gloves. Machiavelli did not invent manipulation. He only exposed the rules of a game we all pretend doesn't exist. To navigate the world, sometimes you must wear the mask, and sometimes you must become it. Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear. Niccolò Machiavelli. We live in a world where masks are currency, where appearances matter more than intentions, where sincerity is weakness, unless it's weaponized. You were taught to be good, to be kind, to speak the truth. And perhaps, in your quiet moments, you still cling to those ideals like fading stars in a sky devoured by smoke. But the world? The world doesn't reward honesty. It rewards strategy. It bows not to virtue, but to control. Not to clarity, but to illusion. Not to love, but to fear. And in this world, those who understand manipulation don't just survive. They reign. What if power was never about strength, but about knowing what others refuse to see? Power is never neutral. It is always seducing, always demanding allegiance. And those who ignore its game are bound to be played. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Niccolò Machiavelli. We like to think the world is fair. That if you are good, good things will follow. That integrity brings rewards. That truth will prevail. But look closer. Look beyond your comfortable myths and curated ideologies. Behind every successful corporation, every government, every viral icon, every spiritual guru, every noble nonprofit, you'll find the same thing. Power. Naked. Calculated. Strategic. And often, disturbingly effective. Why? Because power is not about truth. It's not about love. And it's definitely not about being nice. It's about perception, control, anticipation, and the illusion of virtue. The real tragedy? Most people don't even know they're being manipulated. They think they're free. They think they're thinking. They think they're choosing. But really, they're reacting. To headlines. To algorithms. To fear. To symbols. And those who understand this, those who study how minds move, they can shape nations, opinions, histories. Not with force, but with narrative. This is the philosophy no one dares teach you. The dark wisdom behind every throne. The unspoken language of influence. And the man who first whispered its truths to power? Machiavelli. The hidden battlefield. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. Machiavelli. Manipulation doesn't happen in the open. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It wears many faces. The charming leader. The idealistic influencer. The lover who knows how to say all the right things. The algorithm that feeds you exactly what you crave. The company that uses values to sell what kills you slowly. It disguises itself as morality, freedom, romance, even spirituality. But beneath it, there is always a lever. And someone is always pulling it. Machiavelli was hated not because he was wrong, but because he was right too early. He exposed what polite society couldn't stomach. That behind every smiling politician, there is calculation. Behind every heroic speech, an agenda. Behind every public good, a private motive. He wrote not for the naive, but for the disillusioned. For the realists. For those tired of being used. And in doing so, he gave birth to a philosophy that many found terrifying. Because it didn't ask how the world should be. It described the world as it is. And in doing so, it shattered the illusion. He who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. Niccolò Machiavelli. The subtle art of shadows. Manipulation does not always wear the face of cruelty or tyranny. Often, it whispers comfort. It masquerades as care, as strategy, as intelligence. It walks quietly, unseen, in the corridors of our minds. Machiavelli knew this. In a world obsessed with visibility, likes, followers, power displays, the true manipulators remain cloaked. They do not scream. They do not beg. They plant seeds. The seed of doubt. The seed of fear. The seed of trust. And they water it, not with force, but with silence. Modern manipulation is rarely overt. It is refined. Corporate smiles. Political speeches. Social dynamics masked as friendship. Romantic gestures hollowed out by self-interest. Behind the curtain, puppeteers pull the strings not with fists, but with whispers of need. To understand manipulation, we must first understand this. It is not the tool of evil men. It is the nature of power itself. The anatomy of manipulation. Let's dissect its anatomy, clinically, as a surgeon would peel back layers of skin to reveal the nerve. 1. Perception control. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." In this single sentence lies the entire foundation of manipulation. Control the image. Mask the intent. Manipulation thrives on misalignment between what is seen and what is true. This is not about lying. Lying is clumsy. It's about sculpting reality. The manipulator crafts a version of themselves that appears noble, innocent, or incapable of harm, even while their motives twist beneath the surface. Think of the therapist who uses your trauma to fuel their ego. Think of the lover who mimics your values only to gain control. Think of the politician who says all the right things, with dead eyes. Manipulators understand that perception is reality. They do not fight you. They shape what you see. 2. Emotional leverage. Humans are not moved by logic alone. We are pulled by our fears, our desires, our wounds. Machiavelli urged rulers to study the hearts of men, not just their actions. Why? Because control does not come from domination. It comes from anticipation. To manipulate someone, you must know their longing. The fear of abandonment. The hunger for recognition. The need to be needed. Emotional leverage means turning your target's soul into your weapon. It is not malicious. It is strategic. And in modern life, it is everywhere. Marketing that exploits insecurity. Influences that mirror your values to gain your trust. Spiritual teachers that use your trauma to build their brand. Manipulation today is not loud. It is intimate. 3. Information control. The less you know, the easier you are to control. Machiavelli said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But fear today no longer looks like tyranny. It looks like confusion. A society drowning in conflicting narratives is easier to control. A person who doubts their reality is easier to mold. Information control today is digital, algorithmic, and psychological. It's not about what's true, it's about what trends. The manipulator filters reality, not to inform, but to direct behavior. Like a chess master withholding the real move until it's too late. The psychological weapons. Let's go deeper, into the toolbox of the modern manipulator. Each tactic is not just an external act, it's a distortion of psyche. Gaslighting. Reality is questioned. Memory is manipulated. A slow erosion of your inner compass. You begin to doubt yourself. And once you do, the manipulator doesn't even need to control you. You begin to control yourself. Love bombing. Flooding you with validation. Gifts. Praise. Attention. It feels like love, but it's a hook. And once you're addicted to the high, the withdrawal begins. You chase the praise. You obey the hand that once fed. Triangulation. You're compared to others. You're told someone else is better, more loyal, more worthy. Now you compete for the manipulator's attention. You strive for approval that never arrives. The power remains in their silence. Moral inversion. The manipulator makes you feel guilty for defending yourself. They twist your values, your compassion, your empathy, against you. Now you're the villain. And they, the victim. Machiavelli would admire this tactic. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. And so, a manipulator wears the title of victim, while wielding the sword of control. The Machiavellian mirror. Before we demonize manipulation, let us confront this truth. We all manipulate, at some level. We edit ourselves. We present masks. We withhold. We persuade. We charm. The difference is not in the act, but the intention. Machiavelli was not a villain. He was an observer of truth. He stripped the romanticism of power, revealing its anatomy without anesthesia. We must now hold the mirror to ourselves. Are we the manipulated? Or the manipulators? Or worse, both? Because the moment you refuse to ask that question, you've already been manipulated. Modern Machiavellis. The boardroom CEO who smiles while orchestrating layoffs. The social media figure who cries on camera for views. The conscious community leader who builds a cult of personality. Modern Machiavellists do not wear crowns. They wear brands. They don't imprison bodies, they condition minds. They understand that in the age of data, the new battlefield is attention. And the new weapon is narrative. To understand Machiavelli is to understand the psychology behind today's most powerful figures, not because they read The Prince, but because they live it. The ethical dilemma. Is manipulation always evil? Machiavelli believed that in a corrupt world, morality is a luxury. He argued that a ruler must be willing to do evil to preserve order. But what happens when everyone becomes a ruler of their own microkingdom? When every person is a brand? Every opinion a performance? Manipulation then becomes the default language of survival. In a world obsessed with image, is authenticity even possible? This is the ethical paradox Machiavelli leaves us with. To win in this world, must we lose our soul? Or is there a way to master the psychology of power, without becoming its prisoner? A wise ruler ought never to keep faith when by doing so it would be against his interests. Niccolò Machiavelli. In the previous chapter, we dissected the anatomy of manipulation. We peeled away the noble mask of power to expose its bare, strategic face. Now we arrive at a deeper threshold, not just what manipulation is, or how it operates, but what it does to the soul. This is where transformation begins. In the mirror of power, we either distort ourselves, or we awaken. The manipulated becomes the manipulator. Let's begin with a dark truth. Most manipulators were once victims. They learned the rules not from books, but from betrayal. They studied human behavior not in theory, but in desperation. They observed, silently, as love turned into leverage. As truth became a currency. As power was wielded not by the kindest, but by the most calculating. And so, they adapted. They learned to hide their needs. To weaponize charm. To speak in half-truths and read intentions like maps. They became what once controlled them, because it was the only way to survive. This is the first transformation. Wounded innocence mutates into strategic intelligence. But here lies the tragedy. What begins as a survival instinct, becomes a personality. What begins as armor, becomes a prison. The inner alchemy, from control to clarity. Real transformation doesn't come from learning how to manipulate better. It comes from transcending the need to manipulate at all. To do this, we must understand something few dare to ask. Why do we want control in the first place? The answer is always the same. Fear. Fear of abandonment. fear of being irrelevant, fear of being unseen, fear of being powerless. And so, we build masks. We edit our image. We manipulate perception, not because we are evil, but because we are afraid that our true self is not enough. Machiavelli would call this weakness. But there is another path. Not the path of domination, but the path of inner authority. True strength is not in your ability to control others. It is in your ability to stand unmasked, and still not be shaken. This is the second transformation. From fear-based control to clarity-based presence. Learning from Machiavelli without becoming him. Machiavelli's brilliance is not in his cynicism, but in his clarity. He did not invent manipulation, he exposed it. But now, 5 centuries later, we stand at a new crossroad. Because today, everyone is a strategist. Everyone is managing their image. Everyone is a little bit Machiavellian. So the question is not, should I manipulate or not? But rather, can I master power, without losing my soul? Let's explore how. 1. Know the game, but don't become the game. It's naive to walk into a world of predators pretending to be a saint. Machiavelli warned against this. But it's also self-betrayal to become a predator just to survive. The wise path is this. Learn the rules. See the manipulation. Speak the language of power. But do not lose your essence in the process. Do not become so strategic that you forget how to feel. Do not become so masked that you forget your face. You can play the game, without worshipping it. This is maturity. Power with compassion. Strategy with soul. 2. From control to influence. Manipulators seek control. But leaders seek influence. What's the difference? Control is about domination. Influence is about resonance. Control is rigid, it demands obedience. Influence is fluid, it invites alignment. The manipulator says, do what I want. The master of influence says, see what I see. Feel what I feel. Now choose. One is based on fear. The other, on presence. In the modern world, the most powerful are not those who force, but those who inspire. 3. Turn strategy inward. Machiavelli taught rulers to study others. But transformation begins when we study ourselves. What are the strategies you use to avoid vulnerability? What parts of you manipulate your own mind? The part that gaslights your intuition. The part that love bombs people to avoid rejection. The part that triangulates your values to justify weakness. Before we manipulate others, we often manipulate ourselves. We rationalize. We minimize. We distract. Real power begins when we stop performing, and start listening. To the pain. To the fear. To the patterns we inherited. Turn your Machiavellian intelligence inward. Not to control, but to liberate. 4. Use the sword. Only when necessary. Machiavelli said a ruler must be both lion and fox. Ferocious when needed. Cunning when required. But he also warned. Men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries, for heavy ones they cannot. This brutal advice contains a deeper message. When you strike, strike cleanly. When you act, act decisively. But also, do not draw the sword for petty games. Do not manipulate where truth would suffice. There is nobility in restraint. There is intelligence in silence. There is strength in selective power, the ability to act but choosing not to. 5. Build inner authority. What the manipulator craves most is validation. That is why they control. That is why they charm. That is why they lie. But true transformation means we no longer need to beg the world for proof of our worth. You become a sovereign, not by ruling others, but by ruling yourself. Build an inner kingdom, where no opinion can dethrone you, where no strategy can seduce you, where no manipulation can enslave you. This is not passivity. This is power, the kind Machiavelli never spoke of. because it cannot be written in books. It must be lived in silence. When strategy meets spirit. In the end, Machiavelli gave us a map of the world as it is, not as it should be. He showed us the battlefield, the tools, the dangers. But he did not show us how to transcend the war altogether. That is our task. To study the dark. Not to imitate it, but to illuminate it. To enter the game. Not to win, but to transform it. The true alchemy of power is not turning weakness into strength. It is turning strategy into self-awareness. Manipulation into mastery. Control into clarity. When we do that, we don't just change the game. We become untouchable. The more sand has escaped from the hourglass of our life, the clearer we should see through it. Niccolò Machiavelli. You've walked through shadows. You've stared into the manipulator's mind. You've traced the roots of deception, the masks of control, the anatomy of strategy. And you've begun to understand not just how others manipulate, but how you've been conditioned to betray yourself, in the name of survival. This is the final metamorphosis. This is where the alchemical fire purifies what remains. Where power is no longer about domination, but about discernment, presence, and sovereignty. This is where you become untouchable, not because you dominate the world, but because the world can no longer dominate you. Let's go deeper. The illusion of invincibility. Manipulators believe that power makes them untouchable. They climb high, build walls, accumulate allies, control narratives. They think that if they control perception, they control reality. But this is a fragile illusion. Because the manipulator is only untouchable until their strategy collapses. Until they are outplayed. Until they lose control. Until the mask slips, and their deepest fear is exposed. That they were never loved, only obeyed. That they were never respected, only feared. That their power was not real, only borrowed. This is the fall every false king must face. So, the question is, what kind of untouchable do you want to be? One who rules with masks? Or one who needs no mask at all? True power is not in force, but in freedom. There's a paradox Machiavelli never resolved. The more you try to control everything, the less free you become. You become addicted to perception. Obsessed with outcomes. Afraid of exposure. Trapped in your own strategies. That's not strength. That's imprisonment. True strength is the ability to let go. To speak the truth even if it costs you everything. To walk away from power games that drain your soul. To be misunderstood, and remain centered. To be alone, and still whole. This is what makes someone untouchable. Not their dominance, but their detachment. You can't manipulate someone who has nothing to prove. You can't control someone who knows who they are. You can't break someone who's no longer playing the game. The anatomy of an untouchable mind. Here are the markers of a truly untouchable soul. 1. Self-knowledge. They've explored their shadows. They've faced the truth about their needs, their wounds, their history. They are not confused by compliments nor destroyed by criticism. They know who they are, and who they are not. 2. Emotional discipline. They don't react, they respond. They observe their inner world without panic. They know how to delay gratification, how to endure discomfort, and how to act from alignment, not reactivity. 3. Strategic awareness without dependence. They see manipulation clearly. They can navigate power plays, but don't rely on them. They use strategy when needed, and authenticity when possible. 4. Sovereignty of thought. They do not outsource their beliefs to the crowd. They are not puppets of ideology, tribalism, or cultural scripts. They can think independently, even when it's unpopular. 5. Moral clarity. They don't posture with virtue, they embody it. They've defined their code, their values, their principles, and live by them, even when it hurts. This is the new Machiavellian. One who wields power without being possessed by it. From the prince to the prophet. In The Prince, Machiavelli writes about how a ruler should be feared rather than loved, if he cannot be both. But what if you could become neither feared nor loved, and still be powerful? What if you could stand in the middle of a storm and need nothing from it? Not approval. Not obedience. Not revenge. Not reassurance. This is the power of the mystic. The philosopher. The awakened being. No longer a prince. Now, a prophet. Not manipulating the world, but revealing it. Not seeking power, but embodying clarity. This is not about becoming untouchable by hiding. It's about becoming untouchable by standing fully revealed. Silence, the weapon they cannot use. In a noisy world of persuasion, the most radical act is silence. To say nothing when provoked. To not explain yourself to the unworthy. To leave the game while others beg for victory. Manipulators hate silence, because they cannot use it. They need attention. They need narrative. They need a mirror to feel real. But the untouchable do not beg for reflections. They carry their own light. Your silence is not absence, it is presence without performance. It is power that doesn't need to announce itself. The end of the game is not victory, it's transcendence. Here is the secret Machiavelli could never teach. You win the game not when you dominate it, but when you stop needing to play it at all. Transcendence is not weakness. It is the final evolution of power. It is the realization that control over others is irrelevant, compared to mastery of self. It is the ability to see through deception, and choose truth anyway. To understand darkness, and still walk in light. To know the cost of manipulation, and choose integrity instead. Machiavelli gave us the gospel of strategic power. And it still applies. But strategy is only half the story. The other half is soul. You don't need to reject Machiavelli. You just need to outgrow him. Use his insights. Study the anatomy of control. But never confuse manipulation with mastery. Never confuse strategy with strength. Never confuse power with peace. The most powerful person in the room is not the one who controls the most minds. It's the one who needs nothing from them. Be that person. Not a ruler of men, but a master of self. Not a manipulator of outcomes, but an embodiment of truth. Not a player of games, but a breaker of illusions. Because once you've seen through it all, once you've burned your mask, once you've walked through power, pain, and paradox, there is nothing left to prove. And in that moment, you are untouchable.